Well, welcome back to the virtual world of online learning. Just a couple of weeks of this, and then we're back on campus. Hopefully, you got that announcement. I hope you guys had a great Christmas break. I know I enjoyed the break, but I was starting to get a little squirrely. So it feels good to be kind of doing something constructive again, other than binging on Netflix and eating too many chocolate turtles. Uh, anyways, Happy New Year, everyone. This is just a quick introduction lesson. In fact, as I was going through it, I realized it overlaps a little bit from the root zone introduction in the fall. Maybe I shouldn't have said that. Maybe you wouldn't have noticed. But um, my goal here is to get you guys kind of excited. You know, you're in the home stretch. We're going to wrap up. This winter's going to go quickly. Before you know it, you're going to be looking for jobs, and I'll be posting stuff throughout the term. But, you know, that's the goal. Anyways, let's dive into this introduction to the greenhouse vegetable industry. Um, this is a trial section actually that's being inserted into a pepper house. I think I mentioned before that farms undergo trials all the time. There's new varieties coming out all the time. Right now, most of the breeders, which are in Germany and Holland, there's a tremendous effort on improving all the possible traits in one sort of wonder grab of, really good shelf life, good color, and excellent flavor. And it's really hard. That's kind of like the Holy Grail. I think Mother Nature has us kind of locked into this sort of these simple facts that everything comes at a compromise, right? So um, I think those farms that are good at what they do, they're good at their craft and have ideal uh, growing and growers and excellent harvesters and good packaging facilities. They can handle the varieties that have the best flavors because they typically will bruise and damage more quickly. Um, so farms often will have different locations, like they have plant one, plant two, plant three, etc. And some of them are newer facilities, some are slightly better than others, so they may grow different varieties in different facilities according to what they're capable of producing and harvesting. So um, I know I keep coming, and I'm gonna through the rest of the winter we're gonna bump into this because it's something that um, I'm sensitive about, and I think that the industry is sensitive about, and we need to try to be positive about things like, what does a greenhouse tomato taste like? Is it healthy or is it not? These sorts of things. And I've mentioned this before, and we will be doing some paper reviews this term. We'll dive into it a little more. But, there's no simple answer to that because of what I just talked about, how different farms can grow different varieties. And ultimately, it's the genetics of the tomato that dictate, for the most part, flavor and nutrition and shelf life and stuff like that. And these things all come at a bit of a trade-off. So let's keep looking at this. In your PowerPoint version of this is the YouTube version, but in your PowerPoint, this link here is active. If you want sort of an amateur tour of Beverly Greenhouses, which is just up in Flamborough, they grow cucumbers, and the guy's just sort of walking through. But I'll do some more virtual tours this winter. I think that went over well, and get you guys into some greenhouses virtually if I can't do it physically. But we'll see what the future holds for us this term. I think no one really knows what's going on with COVID. Um, Again, we kind of talked a little bit about this, but Leamington, Kingsville, it's right down near Point Pelee, and then there's Pelee Island out here, which is where there's a major bird sanctuary. If you're into birds, this is a very popular destination for bird watchers because these are key migratory routes for birds migrating from the south back up north in the spring and from the north back south in the fall. It's a safe place with few predators for them to rest on the island. So it's just overrun with birds. Anyways, Kingsville is here. This whole area, basically from Chatham down to Windsor, Blenheim, all this area is full of greenhouses. Kingsville and Leamington are the two hotspots, but there are greenhouses all around this area. We have many graduates working as growers in this area, and I hope to get some of you down there in this area. There are definitely other places, but it's a hotspot, so let's talk about why. It's Canada's most southerly point. And also a couple of pictures here, give you an idea of how big some of these greenhouses are. So Leamington, it lies between the 42nd parallel. It lies on it, sorry, and it's at the same latitude as Rome in Italy, and the same latitude as Northern California. And this often surprises people, but Leamington is further south than 13 U.S. states. So it's a different climate. It's warmer. There's more sunshine. It is perfect for growing vegetables. It has the largest concentration of greenhouses in all of North America, by a huge margin, to be honest. Huge margin. And long before greenhouses, and we're only talking about 30 years, it was very big into field production of tomatoes, potatoes, field peppers, field beans. There still is quite a large amount of field production all the way from Chatham down. But greenhouses have surpassed that production in the last 30 years. So sales of greenhouse vegetables have, as I said, they exceed field grown. I got some stats coming up. This is a picture of field grown peppers being harvested in baskets. And then these are graduates from 3 years ago touring. This was Cedar Line Greenhouses. This is Blake Fisher. He's a senior grower down in the Leamington area. I've known him for a while. Good grower, good guy. Talking about greenhouse peppers, and this is an automated harvest cart that would be rolling to the greenhouse, bringing the peppers into the packing area. At first glance, field grown versus greenhouse grown. There's definitely a difference in the visual quality. Pest pressures being what they are. Field grown, don't kid yourself, unless it's organic, they are sprayed. And sprayed more so than greenhouse. Big thanks to IPM. You know, the fact that we're in a closed environment means that IPM works. It doesn't mean you can't do IPM in the field, but it is very difficult and very expensive. So typically there's more damage. Then you can see there's dirt here from a food safety. Not everyone cares about that, but in the grocery world, they care. That all translates into lower prices for field produced peppers. Similarly with tomatoes, this is a field in Chatham growing tomatoes. Tractors drive down these rows and spray the crops. And in the greenhouse, we have this very clean environment with carts, very efficient. We're not burning diesel to do anything with the crop, with harvesting, transplanting, anything. It's cleaner in that regard. Field tomatoes, typically there's a very wide variety of quality that comes off the field, and it's sorted into retail grade, say this one, and sauce grade, ketchup or tomato soup, sauces, pasta sauces, whatever. There's a variety of quality that's coming off, and on average, field-grown tomatoes are 9 cents a pound. I got these numbers are in pounds. I don't understand that because it's from the OMAFRA website. Apparently, they're still imperial. So 9 cents a pound versus 92 cents on average. And this is 2017 numbers, but The spread, price has gone up, but the spread hasn't changed. To 92 cents a pound for greenhouse tomatoes. That is a huge difference. Huge difference. A 10 factor of 10. Um, Field production still exceeds greenhouse in tomatoes, mainly because there's still a lot of tomatoes being sold for sauces and stuff like that. And in the summer, people buy a lot more tomatoes than in the winter. So fields, they can keep up with some of that larger demand at peak times of the year. But and this is actually older data. It's 88.4 cents versus 79 cents, but you can see the spread hasn't changed. This is 2015. Previous one was 2017. When you talk about peppers, already a long time ago, peppers far exceeded field production. And the price difference between field and greenhouse is, again, substantial. Not 10 times, but it's significant. Cucumbers, it's a tricky one because first of all, you don't really grow seedless cucumbers in the field. You would grow different cucumbers. But this is looking at the bulk market, and generally speaking, greenhouse cucumbers far exceed. Price difference is not as pronounced, but it's still at least double the price for for greenhouse grown versus field. But at the end of the day, cucumbers aren't a major outdoor field producer. Looking at tomatoes, we've gone from 15 million in gross farm sales in 1985 to in 2017 almost 400 million. That's 2,000% increase in 30 years. This link is active in your PowerPoint slide only. That's a huge increase. Cucumbers, it's grown by 1,700%. We're at 240 million in farm gate sales versus 13 million in 1985. And peppers, there was actually no peppers grown in Canada in 1985. It started in 1995. It's fairly late. It was a new thing we brought over from Holland. And it's grown by 7,000%. And to my knowledge, since 2017, pepper production has increased even more. So it is astonishing how much it has. And, peppers, I think we've seen they're fairly low maintenance, low cost to farm. There's a lot less plant management compared to cucumbers and tomatoes. And they have a higher margin. So obviously, but the way farming works is that, people will all jump in and jump out and things sort of level off. You can't all grow peppers. You still need tomatoes and cucumbers. So that's leveling off, but there's still even more now. So why Ontario? Why Leamington? Remember we talked about this in the fall. Proximity to market. We have excellent facilities. We have top-notch greenhouses in our country. We have lots of sun, good access to water, unlike California where water is a major issue. We're also very good at what we do, so we produce quality crops. And then marketing is something that we have spent a lot of time on over the years and gotten quite good at. And there's a ton of interest in alternative packaging now, trying to find sustainable, low environmental impact packaging for tomatoes and cucumbers and whatnot. So that's why Ontario. Yeah, 10% increase in square footage per year on average, but typically there's a number of greenhouses that sort of will stay static, and those that expand grow up by about 25% at a time. So it works out on average to 10%. But and of course, Ontario has more than 50% of greenhouse acreage. And Leamington alone, that's just Leamington, has more vegetable greenhouses than all of the United States combined. Let that sink in. So this is why it's a major area in terms of greenhouse vegetable production. Again, in the fall, we talked briefly about this consolidation of buyers. These are some of the global issues. This is sort of where bigger, like you see it right now with COVID, that small businesses are kind of suffering and big businesses are doing very well. And unfortunately, the same thing applies here. We have, bigger and bigger grocery store chains that are buying up and control everything, right? So in Canada, almost all the grocery stores you see across the country are owned by one of two companies, Loblaw Company East or Sobeys Quebec. So all those stores you see, even though they have different names, they fall under either of those two brands, those companies. Um, Although I noticed in St. Catharines we have a Farm Boy now, so I don't know who owns them. I think they're out of the States, but don't know much about them. It's very expensive. So yeah, global markets. We're watching Brexit in the news, right? We see how international trade is such a big deal, and for us, we're obviously selling into the U.S. market. I already said that before, but we're also buying in extensively from Mexico. So there's all sorts of things at play, and Holland still imports a significant amount to our markets, although not so much into Canada these days, more into the U.S. But some of the issues are our image. Some people still perceive greenhouses as really dirty, and I would argue otherwise. But it's something that we have to work on to educate people that greenhouses can be incredibly efficient. When you look at the yield per carbon footprint, for example, when you look at yield for pesticide use, if any, it's very low compared to field production, for example. And then, of course, there's flavor, which the consumers are always on about, which is valid. And then, of course, border issues with the Americans, always messing around with us. Some snapshots of facilities in operation, packaging. So the greenhouse is always will be a very technical industry, computer controlled, robotics, you name it. But then on top of that, there's the technicalities of varieties and the breeding that we do. We're always on the cutting edge of disease management with IPM, and obviously nutrient management, trying to minimize the waste of nutrients by recycling and tweaking with minimal effluents. And then, of course, the big one is automation. Now, I hope this video works. It may or may not. There we go. This is a cucumber packing line down in Leamington, where they pick mini cucumbers and they're put onto trays by robots. What used to take about 30 staff to accomplish is done by these 4 robots. And they have cameras that intelligently scan the cucumbers so they know what size and what orientation to fit them on the trays. So they all fit perfectly. That's just an example of the kind of technology that you run into in greenhouses. I think a lot of times people don't realize how cutting edge this type of farming is. Some other industry concerns that, things that are out of our control, things like the border, Canadian dollar, personnel issues. Right now with COVID, this has become a real problem. A few farms have had outbreaks and they have to carefully manage the labor to prevent the flow of disease into their farm. So a lot of contact tracing, and they're paying for testing on site and stuff like that. Energy is always something that farms are keenly aware of. Food safety is also something that they're keenly aware of. There's always some new species. This is pepper weevil on the side. This pepper here, you'll see there's just a little dot on that pepper, and the weevil actually lays an egg, it hatches, and then that larva runs around inside the pepper eating the inside out, and it can quickly destroy a pepper crop in a farm. So 2-3 years ago, this was a major issue. It still is an issue, but again, greenhouses have gone to technology and have done a lot of extensive trials and have figured out ways to minimize pepper weevil damage. And there were a couple of farms in the province that were doing a poor job of disposing of infected peppers, which was a huge problem. Just throwing on a field doesn't stop the bugs from propagating. So they were actually turning into hotspots where they once they emerge from the peppers, they'd fly away and infect. So those farms were cleaned up and their practices were improved. Border challenges, I've said this before, always an issue. Delays, paperwork, even just fuel sitting at the border and paying for drivers can be a big cost, especially under COVID where things slow down. Other issues that face the greenhouses are things like water. I mean, we still have lots, but it's something we still have to be very careful we don't waste. Odor, less so, but some farms, like I said, they throw material outside. That can be an issue, but it's less of an issue. The biggest one these days is light pollution. And it can be quite astonishing in some farms how much light is allowed to escape. Here, something as simple as having an energy curtain and closing it at night or blocking most of the light would block that light from shining up into the sky. And more farms are installing energy curtains, which of course they should have done a long time ago, but maybe they just didn't have the money yet. But near me, there's an LED farm growing herbs, and for a while they were just disregarding all the neighbors, and I'm 3 kilometers away, and man, it was purple glow all over the place. It was unbelievable. And a lot of people complained, and the farm installed shade and also shifted their lighting more to the early morning hours when people are asleep. So that's less of an issue. But light pollution is certainly a problem. Whether it's LED or HPS, it doesn't really matter. In some regards, the LED light is so weird looking, it's almost more disturbing. But anyways, then of course there's, effluent, which we've talked about, and waste disposal. Labor issues. So obviously a lot of offshore workers work on the farms. This is a couple of Mexican workers working in a tomato farm. They're up high in the scissor lift, tying off the tops. So some of the things are here, health and safety. With COVID, this is huge. Their living conditions. This is kind of old news, actually. Provincial legislation has pretty strict standards for their living conditions, and a lot of farms have really stepped up to the plate and really improved their living conditions. I have to sneeze. I'm going to pause for a second. Okay, so then injuries, I don't know. I mean, you are working at heights, I suppose, in a scissor lift, but I don't think there's been major issues. I think there's been a couple of major injuries over the years, and they were more related to packing machinery and forklifts. So that stuff happens everywhere, but there's nothing glaring. But as far as the offshore workers, some of the things that people often don't realize is that the farm covers the cost of their airfare, their housing, the utilities in the housing, transportation to get groceries. With all those factors together, typically it works out to about at minimum $18 an hour for offshore labor. Comparing this to the average wage in California, which is at $11 an hour, and this is with the legally reported wage. There's a lot of farms that operate with illegal offshore labor in California, and those numbers are down to around $5 an hour, which is astonishing. It used to be even less, but wow. Where Canada's not exempt from some of the challenges with farm labor. Not so much the vegetable sector because they're watched carefully by the government, but the ornamental sector, so cut flower and potted plant producers, they will use what are called farm labor contractors. These companies are supposed to be like a temp agency for farms. there's not a lot of oversight, and quite a few of them operate without an HST number, which means that they're not a legitimate business. And uh, there's a lot of evidence that they're not paying good wages, that they have fees that they deduct from the employees. Like, for example, they charge them to drive them to and from the farm, and they charge them a substantial amount, like $20 to $30. Um, and oftentimes they employ illegal immigrants, which they can use to sort of make them afraid to report them if there's anything like that their fees are high, or they're not being treated very fairly. They'll say, well, you're an illegal immigrant, you want us to report you. So I'm not a big fan of these companies. I think they're pretty shady. Our government isn't very brave when it comes to taking on these sorts of things, but I'm not going to say that there's a ton of them around, but there certainly are enough to bother me that they are a problem. I've run across them and both at nurseries and caught and potted plant producers. So, but anyways, humans will be humans. They'll always find ways to cheat. Um, some of the things that, where we're focusing in the future here for the greenhouse sector is energy conservation is a big one. We know that right now we're really benefiting from cheap natural gas. It's actually well below where it should be price wise. And farms are aware of that, and they're trying to improve their efficiency so that when natural gas goes back up to where it probably should be, they'll be better positioned to keep their profits in line. They're always researching alternative fuels or energies like, using geothermal or biomass, or bio waste. They're also, as you know, because a lot of you are LED light fans, there's a lot of research going into alternative lighting. Although keep in mind, not all crops are lit very much, especially in the vegetable sector. I mean, some are, but typically only a small section of the farm is lit, not the whole thing. So lighting doesn't account for a massive amount of their costs. And then, of course, there's grower knowledge, always, training and improving because there's new techniques, new information that comes out constantly. So investing in their growers is something that they also do. Um, you know, uh, there is a sort of a international standard that was set by the University of Wageningen for yield, and a lot of farms now assess their in the tomato sector will assess their yields, and University of Wageningen can produce 100 kilograms of tomatoes. I'm really bad at writing with my right hand. Per square meter in a calendar year. And that is a really high number. A lot of farms are happy with 65 kilograms per square meter. There's quite a few in Ontario that are hitting 80. So they know that this can be done. So a lot of the farms are trying hard to figure out how to get there. So that plays into your costs, your margins, et cetera, et cetera. So definitely things to look for in the future. This course is obviously all about greenhouse vegetable production. That's what it's called. And I can confidently say that I know that's where most of the good jobs are. So I'll keep saying that. And it's definitely the future's bright. There's constant growth. There's always new things coming out. This is a link to carbon capture, where they're collecting CO2 from the atmosphere, liquefying it, and selling it to greenhouses, who then obviously incorporate it into their produce. There's, marketing, packaging, you name it. There's all sorts of opportunities. Not everyone ends up being a grower. Some go into the sales side of it. Some go into human resources, you name it. But definitely there's a future in it. So as we go into this term, we're going to look into more detail in growing tomatoes, peppers, cucumbers, and some of the nuances and newer techniques, and some of the challenges and diseases, etc. So after a couple of weeks, hope to get you into the college again and working in the crops. I have no idea what they look like. I saw them last when you guys were here, so fingers crossed that they're alive. Okay, talk to you later.